Good morning or afternoon, scrappers. My name is Master Mimic, and welcome back to another episode of Roaring D20s, a show where I sit here and talk about basically everything that I want to talk about. I know, a little bit of a different intro, but that's because today I'm not really going to be talking about anything really D&D related. Instead, I put up a poll up on Twitter, as much as Twitter can be considered relevant these days, about essentially the significance of Darklands episode 18 and how important it was for me personally to get it out there and, introduce the characters in it. And it turns out the poll was, there were those of you who wanted to know precisely why it was so important, so that's why I'm here. Uh, so yeah, if you're following me, obviously Darklands is one of the biggest. No, it's the biggest show that we have on the channel. Just recently, I released episode 18, and episode 18, Not Quite Paradise, was a very important episode, not just in the Darklands continuity, but also because on a personal level, it it kind of was a chapter being crossed in my life. Uh, Basically, the reason I wanted to dedicate an episode of the show to just talking about, episode 18 is because I wanted to kind of give you guys an understanding of the origins and the significance behind Colt and Gatling and the manager. Uh, I guess, yeah, we'll just jump right into it. So, I will simply say it, if it wasn't for Colt and Gatling, there really wouldn't be a Darklands. I mean, that's a little shocking to say. I mean, we're on episode 18 and we're just introducing these characters, so what's so important about them? Well, let's jump back a long ways. I would say probably as far back as about 2004, I would be confident to say. Maybe a little later, I don't know. But basically, I ended up no, it was later than that. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Basically, the story I'm going to explain is going to kind of give you a date and time frame anyway. So, it was on one Christmas where I opened up a present and there it was, my first PlayStation 3. Well, my first and only PlayStation 3. This was really cool of me, or really cool for me, sorry, because this was the first next gen console at the time that I had ever, received. And with it came with a copy of Fallout 3. Uh, these days, Fallout 3 kind of has a sort of you love it or hate it type relationship, but I'll tell you this, even today, I still do love it. I think it's a fantastic addition to the Fallout series, despite what people, mostly the purists might say. It brings the series forward in a lot of different avenues, not just because it puts the game series for the first time in the first person, but it also expands on a lot of different things, which was eventually perfected when they did Fallout New Vegas. But that's neither here nor there. Basically, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I haven't been subtle with the fact that Fallout is a direct inspiration for Darklands. I mean, I'm not going to go into specific details as to, what went into what, but I mean, anyone who's a fan of Fallout and a fan of Darklands will know, where the similarities are. But where, the thing with Fallout 3, though, is it brought to my attention the concept of a post-apocalypse. I mean, I had already known about, the zombie apocalypse. There was, I think I watched Mad Max, Fury Road. No, sorry, not Fury Road. Road Warrior. And I just remember thinking that, the post-apocalypse was interesting, but Fallout 3 really kind of helped solidify my real love for that particular genre. The fact that, if done well, post-apocalypse can be both exciting, but also it'll always carry the sense of melancholy. There's a sad story behind everything. No matter what happens, and no matter what great happy endings might occur within this series, it's not going to erase the fact that this story is being told in the ruins of the world that came before. And so Fallout 3 was instrumental because what happened was then during my time in high school, I began kind of exploring my own take on post-apocalypse. Uh, and the the characters who were at the forefront of this story were Colt and Gatling, Trisha McTavish and Ben Troy. There were different interpretations going forward. There was a time when they were. What was it? There was a time when they were. God, this is gonna sound great, gross. There was a time where they were brother and sister. It was going to be Trisha McTavish and Benjamin McTavish. But then I decided that it would probably be better if they were just partners and they didn't have that familial tie, between them. So Ben became Ben Troy. But that still didn't quite like click really. So eventually I introduced a few, like I want to say like maybe a year or two later, that they were actually lovers, But there was one thing that never changed, one aspect of their story that never changed, and that was they were bounty hunters. Uh, Trisha was always going to be the smaller, the smaller type. She's the one who uses the hand cannons and the quick draw slinger type, and Ben was going to be the heavy ordnance type person. And it was funny enough, it wasn't actually because the first thing I'm going to say is the concept of Ben being inside essentially a suit of power armor didn't actually come from Fallout 3. That's what's kind of ironic here. Instead, I watched that movie Elysium, the one from Neil Blomkamp, starring, I think it's with Matt Damon. The exosuit that he wore in that movie really excited me in a lot of ways because I thought that it was really cool. What if it was actually had like armor on it? And I know that's exactly what a power armor is, but I thought of something that was a little bit more lithe and more easily maneuverable. And so I decided to put Ben in one of those, and actually as time went on it kind of became less of an Elysium type exosuit, and I kind of always kept picturing him more as the big cumbersome type armor, kind of like the Fallout Brotherhood of Steel power armor, but maybe even bigger. The first idea that comes to mind is probably something akin to the Ironmonger from the first Iron Man. Excuse me. Just something big and clunky, but also very intimidating and very powerful. It's just make Ben as much of a polar opposite to Trisha as I could. And the stories I initially had about them, funny enough, actually, the next episode of Darklands, episode 19, coming out, it's gonna take place in a city called Kaiser Bay. Kaiser Bay is centered in Oregon, and that was actually the site of, I want to say, the second interpretation of Colt and Gatling. Yeah, I had a bunch of different attempts at it. Mostly it was I think their very first adventure, it was more they were blowing into this town in the middle of a sun-bitten wasteland, and they had to go up against this kingpin who was living in town and didn't. Basically, he got a little spooked by having two bounty hunters in town and thought they were after him, so he ended up he ended up sending his own children to deal with Colt and Gatling. But the thing was, his children were all modified in different ways. I forget exactly the details, but I know one of them was like a mutant. Another one was also in a suit of armor. That's off the top of my head. Honestly, I'm not gonna really pick my brain too hard to remember that kind of thing. But basically, though, I remember I got a decent amount into that particular writing. I'm trying to honestly remember. No, I'll get to that later. But that never really went anywhere. I kind of hit a brick wall there, and then high school life kind of got in the way, so I didn't really touch Colt and Gatling for a while. When I reapproached them, this time it was more in college, so after 2009. And this version of them was a little bit closer to how they would appear in the show itself, uh, where they were both near a settlement called Kaiser Bay, but Kaiser Bay was occupied by. I'm not gonna. Unfortunately, the YouTube algorithm doesn't like me as it is because I'm such a small channel, and I'm not gonna start saying the names of a particularly infamous German political party that was around during a very controversial time in history. But yeah, basically, their type descendants took over Kaiser Bay, and they were essentially like the lords of Oregon and every a bunch of territories spanning. I think like I said, almost all the way to like certain parts of Northern California, and they yeah, you had this essentially like a totalitarian regime going on. Trisha McTavish was living in a colony out in the boonies called Emerald Acres, and Ben was actually part of a family that lived in a bunker, so kind of like an inspiration taken from the Fallout vaults. But with this bunker though, it was implied that Ben's family was essentially a cult. The one that he calls father wasn't actually his father, and that was going to be one of the big things about the story was you didn't know who Ben's family was. It's just he was found as a child and taken in by these bunker dwellers. But the thing that I kind of some of the things I a little bit remember is eventually Ben and Trisha would meet because they would both end up tracking the similar this sorry, I'm like really trying to pick my brain here. Basically, there's a patrol of these bad guys going through, and they ended up picking up the existence of Emerald Acres, but at the same time, they also were spotted by Ben, who at that time was also patrolling, his own ground. So he decided to try and intercept them along with Trisha, and that's essentially would be like their first job together was taking out this guy. But that would cause this chain of events where the bad guys would detect, hey, one of our guys went missing around this area, and eventually Emerald Acres would be attacked and destroyed. The bunker would be, demolished, and Trisha and Ben would be more or less the only survivors of their respective families. And during that time, somewhere in there, Ben gets placed inside the, I think I called it a Terra suit, or no, yeah, no, it was a Terra suit. It was a suit from a military project called Project Terracotta. I'm not going to go too much into the details because I don't remember a lot, but that's okay. So yeah, he's in this Terra suit, and yeah, that was. But the whole point of it though was that Ben and Trisha would meet up with this Native American tribe that was living in the area who had essentially started this guerrilla war against against the bad guys, and they would launch. I believe I even called it Operation Valkyrie 2, where they attacked Kaiser Bay and they managed to eliminate the leadership there and force the bad guys to flee it. And what would have been basically what would happen from that is that this part of the book, yeah, sorry, I should have been a little bit more outright with this. All this was meant to be a book. Okay, this was all a novel. Um, and so the leader of the bad guys was, or the leaders, I should say, was a brother and sister duo that I kind of had put in a little bit of a, let's say, Lannister type love between the two of them. I'm not going to go too much into detail. For those who know Game of Thrones, you know what I'm talking about. And during this big battle, Ben was going to actually be able to off, I believe it was the brother, and in a rage, the sister would vow revenge as she made her escape. And the second half of the book would essentially be Ben and Trisha a few more years into their, now they become bounty hunters to make ends meet, and they would end up running afoul of this woman who resurfaced with this new regime under her, but this time it was essentially like all it was meant to do as a government was find and eliminate the two people who killed her brother. And that was the book. And thinking back to it, I still think that there was some cool things going for it. I know that there was a lot of places that were directly inspired by, because I actually lived in a neighborhood relatively similar near Oregon, and so I took a lot of inspiration from like specific locales around there. Not so much anymore. So anyone who's watching episode 19, keep in mind that all the influences from that particular part of my life are not present. But anyway, so it was. I just remember reading it and liking how vivid things were. Everything just kind of really clicked, and there was some pretty good imagery. I liked the interactions with the characters, but again, it's just I couldn't commit enough time to it. That was my problem back then. I would start a project, kind of get a decent amount of ways into it, and then I would stop. And for a brief while in college, I tried to adapt the novel into a script, but that went even shorter. That went even even less because basically as soon as I left the screenwriting class, I wanted to do other things, and other projects came around. Mostly a couple of ill-fated short movies I was trying to make with Balcosaurus back in the day, but that's neither here nor there. But basically what I'm trying to say is, so for a while Colt and Gatling just kind of sat on the back burner, and from let's say for a lot of the early 2010s, I would have occasionally kind of bring them up and maybe think about overhauling things. I think there was even a time I even considered kind of making things like making the whole post-apocalypse kind of like a pseudo sci-fi meets fantasy. Like it was a post-apocalypse sort of like Fallout, where you had the semi-advanced machinery, but there was also magic and monsters and stuff like that. But that idea is so vague that I can barely remember it. So clearly, it didn't go far either. Excuse me. I just had a cup of tea. I just did. And in case anyone's wondering if my voice might sound a little hoarse, it's because I just did a lot of voices. So, uh, but I want to, since I'm here in the recording booth, I might as well have some fun and record this video and yada yada yada. Anyway, so that was Colt and Gatling, and they were always like, those two always had like a certain place in my heart. Not just because they were one of my earlier creations, but it was kind of like I always felt like I couldn't really do them justice. I really liked the characters. It's just I always felt sad that I really couldn't bring them to life in some way. And as a result of it, and it's not that I never got depressed about it. It was just always every now and then they would like spring up. Remember that idea you had, TJ, of that post-apocalypse Colt and Gatling? Remember that? And it just never really resurfaced. But before I go any further, though, so then there was I'd like to talk about their boss, the manager. So the manager, I won't go too much into details because, well, more or less, he's actually largely unchanged compared to when I originally created him, which is the most surprising thing about this whole situation. It's just that the manager has gone through so many years of me doing different overhauls of Colt and Gatling, me switching the story around, switching the roles around, changing relationships and dynamics and even the aspects of the world entirely, but the manager has always remained the same. And I feel like that was part of the reason why I was really excited to introduce him in Darklands, because it fits the theme of his character in general. Like, that was the whole point of the manager, is that he seemed like somebody who was not a part of the post-apocalypse. He just had seemingly omnipotence, like a god in this world, where he just had seemingly had this unlimited supply of resources, and he would have like wisdom and knowledge of things that he really shouldn't, but he does. And so I was excited creating him. But also, I remember when I was doing the casting call for the manager, I was the most critical with him at the same time, because the manager is very what's the word, enigmatic. Those who know about him either fear him because of the way he is, or they just straight up avoid him, or they despise him outright and are spending their days trying to find and destroy him. This is because the manager is just he's a very mysterious figure. He only appears relatively speaking, he only makes his appearance in the Darklands speaking through bot messengers, speaking through like the speakers in them. When I say bot messengers, I mean the servitors from the the United States, not the Republic bots. Anyway, sorry, just thought I'd clarify. But yeah, but what was really interesting about the manager is that he's sort of the same way. You're not really sure what his goals are. It seems as if it might be money, but what could he exactly do with his money? It seemed like all the reward for the jobs done by Colt and Gatling go directly to them. So what does he get from this? The most vague answer I could give without spoiling anything is that he is a player of a very large game, one far bigger than anything I've introduced yet in the show. And so I guess consider this a little bit of a neat little foreshadowing of what's to come. Anyway, now for the actual world of Colt and Gatling, I mean, obviously the Darklands is the, I guess you could say the penultimate, conclusion to what happened. But when I first came up with the concept of Colt and Gatling back when they were siblings, this was directly, obviously, inspired by Fallout 3, but it was in a world where World War III broke out between the United States and the Soviet Union, and then it was like a jump ahead 100 years, and that's where Colt and Gatling were. But there was some things that, obviously, given I was in high school at that time, so I'm not necessarily gonna fault me too much on lack of realism, but I remember there were things like there were no more trees in the world because there were just so many nukes going off. So so instead there were oxygen generators being placed out there, but only near settlements. So as a result, you get these literal pockets of civilization, and the people who can generate oxygen would be able, build up more of these towers, would actually be able to, expand. But I think that's one of the reasons why the world just kind of fell apart. Because even as the older I grew and the more I began to understand, nature and physics, I kind of realized, well, this is kind of dumb. And I was trying to be cool in certain ways, kind of like a little smarmy attitude to the post-apocalypse. The literal title of the book was Colt and Gatling, Welcome to the Apocalypse. It just felt, thinking back to it, I'm just like, yee. Sorry, just real quick, I wanted to mention, they also rode around on a, quote, tank-like motorcycle. Basically a bipedal, a tank with two wheels like a motorcycle. That was called Mean Marcy. I would eventually reuse this concept when coming up with the eventually would use sorry, I got distracted. I would eventually use this concept for Amanda's vehicle in Darklands. For those who those who don't know. And funny enough, Marcy, Mean Marcy, where I get the name Marcy was actually the name of one of my teachers. She was a teacher that I had for a video production class, and I just remember a lot of guys really liked her. Like she was really pretty, she was really cute. Not me, obviously, but so and I just remember it was kind of devastating when people found out that she not only got married, but she also ended up pregnant. I think during my senior year. So it was kind of like she's off the she's off the market, guys. Was kind of the way that it kind of felt. Again, we're a bunch of high school dudes. They were a bunch of high school dudes. So yeah, they hormones reign supreme, but whatever. But I just thought it was funny because like I said, Marcy, I'm not going to say her last name, but yeah, Marcy was very influential for like getting me interested in just creating media in general outside of just writing books and stuff. I could even say she had a huge hand in eventually giving me the inspiration to create my channel, to create videos, to make something entertaining for people. And so I kind of like that Marcy, Mean Marcy, would eventually kind of be like my little nod to her, a little like thank you for getting me started. Why I call it Mean Marcy was because, well, mean sounded cool. Anyway, where was I going? Oh yeah, but yeah. So then when I redid the series back during the I'll say the Kaiser Bay arc or timeline, whichever you call it. I'm honestly trying to remember exactly what caused the apocalypse. I want to say it might have been the same thing. It might have been a solar flare because there were still trees, there were still things like that. Yeah, I want to say it was probably a solar flare, and but once again, it was it didn't really go anywhere, and that's why that was why the whole exosuit thing was so big was because it was a piece of advanced military technology that still worked despite that still worked despite the EMP that crippled the globe. But all the things like the Republic of California, the United States being a completely different power than it is in our world. That was all Darklands originals. That just kind of came into its own. But let me see. But I do know that Colt and Gatling had during that stage though had a collaboration, I guess is the way I would put it, or like it's based on the same universe as another story I was trying to write. This is around the time I was really starting to dive into my love of World War II history, and look at back now, it's like the whole thing is just like really dumb, and I kind of just like cringe a little bit when I think about it. But because, like I said, there was just the name of the book title. I don't want to give it away. I'm not gonna give away the title of my alternate history book because it does have something to do with the point of divergence in the Darklands universe. That's actually something I just want to go on a little, side here. That's one of the big mysteries to Darklands that I am having a lot of fun kind of building out, building upon is clearly this isn't our history. Clearly things in this timeline go very different compared to, what happened in ours. So one of the big mysteries that I am, keeping very close to my chest, other than, something like Quinn's origins and stuff like that, is where in this historical timeline did our history divide with the Darklands history? And so that's what I mean. I'm going to keep that. But this is especially episode 19 coming up. Episode 19 has a big whopping puzzle piece for those who are trying to kind of piece together the aspects of this world and are trying to kind of figure things out on their own, you know. So yeah, so just a little hint for you. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, this book I was writing, they kind of were one and the same, like they were in the same universe, but I can't, I couldn't tell you for the life of me how they like were one, other than I think there was like mech suits during World War II. Again, like I said, it was, you know, it was kind of a little preposterous story, but it's all right. It is what it is. Um, if Balcasaurus is listening to this, he knows. Yeah, he knows. Let's see. But yeah, so jump ahead to 2022. I am working on Darklands, and I had this idea of one day incorporating Colt and Gatling into the series. It was easy for me to kind of twist things around in their origins to make them fit within this universe. It wasn't very difficult, especially the manager. The manager was, like I said, was almost entirely unchanged. But it was kind of daunting for me at the same time, because it's one thing to write about it. It's one thing to have notes upon notes about these characters, but bringing them to life was something that I felt a little intimidated by. I had to really I had to really buckle down and make sure that this story would give life to these characters who have been sitting on the fringe of my mind for, I would say, almost 20 years. And so, like, when I was first, you know, really delving into, like, getting them made and whatnot, first there was the actual writing aspect of them. Uh, I kept aspects of their personalities, like, Ben was the guy in the big armor, but he also had a really big heart. You know, he was, ironically, he was the softer of the two of them, while Trisha, I guess you could say, was a little bit more vengeful. She was a little bit more impulsive, but the one constant that kept her kind of, you know, kept her cool in all things was her love for Ben. So in that way, they were essentially made for each other. One way or another. So neither one of them really, like, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of rambling here, but what I'm trying to say is basically I had to keep in mind that, you know, these guys had to basically be a lot more than just they're hardened badass criminals. You know, they're not criminals, but yeah, bounty hunters. Uh, but at the same time, I had to include the fact that so they could be hard when they had to be, but when they were together, it was when they were at their most vulnerable, when they were the softest. So I think Balcasaurus described Ben perfectly as saying he was surprisingly pleasant. A guy in this big ol' armor who just unloaded on a room full of bad guys and crushed one's skull under his metal boot is actually one of the most, you know, warm-hearted characters that I think I've introduced in the series in a long time. Uh, and then Trisha had this kind of, you know, femme fatale approach to things, but when she was with Ben, she was a lot happier. You know, she didn't have to put on such a strong facade, you know. And you know, the banter between them was very important, and it took me a few tries to really like get them to really click. But what really helped was the fact that a lot of their conversations, well, their conversation around the campfire was very similar to like conversations me and Batty have, where a character doesn't have to, you know, two characters in love don't have to be caressing their hair. Oh, my love, my beauty, oh, my muse. You know, they don't have to be like, like, not smarmy, what's the word? They don't have to be schmaltzy like that. They had to be friends, was basically the way I wanted to go about it. They needed to talk like they were best friends. So they had their little, you know, their little jabs at each other. They did their little joking, you know, moments, but then they were also very open to each other. It's obvious, though, that Ben's condition makes intimacy a little bit, bit difficult. But that's the thing, though. That I've seen that kind of thing appear in like shows and movies, and it's such an obstacle to people. But I didn't want to, see it as that. It's more of, hey, let's try and make things work. But what, by things I mean make that work. But that was the thing that I wanted for Colt and Gatling was the physical aspects of their relationship weren't what was the most dominant. The two of them were soulmates is kind of what I was trying to go for. And just real quick, I need to really give my huge thanks to Diana Kennedy and James Newman. you guys, you guys really brought these characters to life. Like, I really hope you guys get an idea of how important these characters are to me. And the fact that you two were able to bring them to life so vividly, like, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional just talking about it because it's just, there's a certain accomplishment, or not even accomplishment, it's just like a feeling of just triumph to see these characters finally come to life and have these people, these two amazing voice actors really give them their all. Like they brought the characters from my teenage years to life in ways that I would say probably 10 years ago I would never have even considered that I'd be sitting here talking about Colt and Gatling being brought to life. Like, wow. And also, obviously, Jordan Anderson, dude, he brought the perfect spirit of the manager in as well. Like, just working on that scene of them around the campfire was one of the most fun experience and one of the most surreal moments I've ever had working on a Darklands episode, because it was, oh my god, this is them. These are the characters that I've been trying to get out there for so long, and it's finally happened. They are finally real, as a show about a talking rabbit and a scrapper with talking bots and all that can be. They are there. They're alive. As a creator, that's one of the greatest pleasures that we can feel, to see our creation given life and being able to see and make connections with people who can make that dream happen. I have only the most deepest gratitude for everybody who helped make episode 18 what it was. Like, it's not even the longest episode of the series. It's actually one of the shorter episodes, but it's possibly one of the most important aspects of my creative life that I've ever done. Because this has been my dream for so long, and now all I can do is just build on it. And I'm gonna have some amazing voice actors to help me do it, and I am only excited to see what can happen with these characters and how they interact with Jules and Amanda and Leo, and just how they exist in this Darklands universe. Just who knows. Episode 18 is just the beginning. Sorry, like I said, I'm getting emotional, but I thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you for bringing them to life. Thank you for allowing me to live and see the day where Colt and Gatling exist. They exist. They're real. Figuratively. Goodness. Alright, that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about, Give you guys a bit of an understanding of how this seemingly not insignificant, but how this little short video about these two bounty hunters and how important it was to me. Anyways, thank you once again. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jordan. You know what? Thank everybody who helped make this series, or make this episode, the series, everything. Like, I know I'm just a small channel. I'm sure this video might get, if I'm lucky, maybe over 100 views. But I'm looking at the cast right now. Marion, Jeremy Volk, Dylan Mahoney, just everybody. Like, you guys, and everyone before that, everyone else, going as far back as episode 3 when I was just working with this series with a bunch of my friends. Balkasaurus, Tetsuya, Araya Makai, Marcus Rothenberg, Erica Sherman, Clover Wren, Chris Bauer. Like, there's so many of you guys who I owe the most sincere gratitude to. You guys helped me bring this series to life. You helped me create this world so I can make Colt and Gatling a part of it. This has been one of the most incredible experiences of my life, and the best part is, it's just, this is just the start, I get to do more casting calls. I get to hear how people work with episode 19. I get to work on episode 19 and work forward. And what's great is there's episodes coming up where I get to once again work with Mr. Creepypasta. There's an episode where Saber Spark voiced a character. Saber Spark, one of those YouTubers who I've been watching for years. He's in my show. I still can't quite get my head around that. Holy crap. Crimson Rogue. Like, oh my god. Crimson Rogue is in my series. It's just, I'm sorry. I'm just like, I know, I'm just like stammering all excitedly like a freaking... I'm just so grateful, guys. I'm just so happy. I'm so happy to be here. Let's keep going. Let's make more Darklands. Let's make more shows. Let's just have fun, huh? Let's make more things a reality. You are all absolutely incredible people. Now, let's go kick some ass. I hope you all have an amazing day. You've all certainly enjoyed it. Or you've all certainly deserved it. Like, that's what I mean. I need to get off here. I'm a little bit like, bleh, now. And for those who, are just listening, for those who I haven't had the opportunity to work with voice acting wise, I hope your days is just as incredible. Because just you sitting here and listening to me go blah, 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 I'm so gratitude. It's just, like, that just, you guys help make my dream work. Teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, all right, I'll get off here for real. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Have a great one.